If you think the Social Security decision is about one birthday, one age, one clever rule, or one magical number that all smart retirees should obey, then you are thinking about retirement like a headline writer, not like a capital allocator. That is where I want to begin. Not with age 62, not with age 67, not with age 70. Begin with a bridge. That is the image I want in your head, a bridge, because that is what the Social Security decision really is. On one side of the bridge is the point where earned income weakens, ends, or becomes unreliable. On the other side is the point where a larger Social Security benefit becomes available. If you wait, in between those 2 points sits a stretch of time that has to be crossed with something. You can cross it with wages. You can cross it with savings. You can cross it with a spouse, earnings. You can cross it with pensions, taxable accounts, Roth assets, part-time work, strong liquidity, or a larger portfolio that can safely carry the strain. Or you can discover, much too late, that you never really had a bridge at all. That is the whole story. People think the question is whether waiting until 70 is smart. The better question is whether your household can reach 70 without damaging the rest of the retirement machine so badly that the larger check arrives too late to save what the crossing already destroyed. That is the right question. And once you understand that, the whole conversation changes. The source material gets this exactly right. The attention-grabbing headline says 90% of Americans are ignoring the number one piece of Social Security advice, which makes it sound like people are refusing obvious wisdom. But once you look at the actual claiming patterns, the actual math, and the actual constraints of real households, the truth is not that most Americans are irrational. The truth is that many households simply do not have the bridge required to delay, and that turns a supposedly elegant strategy into something much more conditional. Fay file a site, Fay turn 65 file 0 Fay. That is what I want to show you. Not whether waiting is good in theory, whether waiting fits the machine, because theory is cheap, retirement is expensive. I have spent too much of my life around money to admire plans that sound brilliant in a research paper and start breaking the moment an ordinary household tries to live inside them. A plan is not strong because it looks mathematically beautiful in isolation. A plan is strong when it survives contact with real life, and real life is where this whole Social Security question gets interesting. Yes, delaying can be powerful, very powerful. The source material lays out the arithmetic clearly. A person entitled to about $2,000 a month at full retirement age might get roughly $1,400 a month if they claim at 62. If the same person waits until 70, that benefit can rise to about $2,480 a month. That is a 77% jump in monthly income. Fay Felicite, Fay turn 65 file 0 Fay. That is not trivial. That is not a rounding error. That is real money. And because it is real money, people fall into one of two lazy camps almost immediately. Camp 1 says, see, everybody should wait. The bigger check is obviously better. Camp 2 says, nobody knows how long they will live. I will take the money early and enjoy it. Both responses are too simple for a serious life. The bigger check is not a conclusion. It is an ingredient. It belongs inside a larger system. That is what most people miss. A bigger future check can absolutely help protect against longevity risk. It can reduce pressure on a portfolio later. It can improve the survivor benefit for a spouse. It can act like a larger inflation. Adjusted floor under a retirement plan. The source material is right to say that many researchers and institutions describe delaying as one of the strongest moves in retirement when the rest of the plan can carry it. Fay file site, Fay turn 65 file 0 Fay, but the larger check only solves the right problem if the bridge to reach it is affordable. That is the phrase I want burned into your mind. A stronger future benefit is only useful if you can cross the years before that benefit arrives without ruining the rest of the structure. That is what headlines hide. And because they hide it, they turn a planning question into a morality play. It starts sounding like good retirees are patient and bad retirees are impulsive, as though the problem were mostly behavioral nonsense. The real difference is often much colder than that. Some people have enough capital, enough health, enough work flexibility, enough spouse coordination, and enough bridge assets to delay intelligently. Others do not. That is not a personality flaw. That is a balance sheet. So I am going to show you this the only way I think it should be shown. Not as a slogan, as an engineering problem, because retirement is not a reward ceremony. It is a system transition, and Social Security is not a one-button answer. It is one support beam inside the larger retirement bridge. The first mechanism is what I call the bigger check illusion. This is where people get trapped because the visible math is so persuasive. The source material gives the standard example, and it is useful. If your full retirement age benefit is $2,000 a month, claiming at 62 might cut it down to around $1,400. Wait until 70 and it rises to about $2,480. That is a 77% increase. Fay Felicite, Fay turn 65 file 0 Fay. That number is big enough to hypnotize people. And once people are hypnotized by a single number, they stop asking the harder questions. How many years must be crossed to reach that larger check? What assets are being drawn down during those years? What strain does that create? What happens if the market falls early? What happens if the household's health or work capacity changes during the wait? What happens if the bridge is much weaker than the larger check makes it sound? That is why I call it the bigger check illusion. The larger number is real. The illusion is thinking that the number settles the case by itself. It does not. A bigger check later means fewer checks. Now, a bigger check later may require withdrawing heavily from a modest portfolio during the most fragile years of retirement. A bigger check later can absolutely be worth it if the machine is strong enough. A bigger check later can also become a very expensive trophy if the machine is too weak to reach it safely. This is one of the reasons I distrust blanket advice so much. Advice becomes dangerous the moment it stops respecting structure. The public loves pure answers. Real life does not. The second mechanism is what I call the longevity shield. Now let us look at the people for whom delaying can genuinely be one of the best moves available. The source material is strong here. It explains that delaying can be especially valuable for people likely to live a long time. People with strong family longevity, people in good health, women who statistically often live longer, higher earners, married households where survivor benefits matter, and retirees using the larger future Social Security payment as a way to reduce late life portfolio strain. Fay file site Fay turn 65, file 0 Fay, that is the longevity shield. If you are likely to live long enough, the larger check is not merely more money, it is protection. It is one of the few ways an ordinary household can buy a larger stream of inflation-adjusted lifetime income without depending on market returns. That matters. A larger guaranteed cash flow in your 80s is not the same thing as a slightly nicer spreadsheet in your 60s. It can keep a weak market from destroying a fragile portfolio. It can keep a surviving spouse from living on a much smaller floor. It can reduce the amount of money that must be pulled from investments late in life when flexibility and earning power are often gone. This is why I like the word shield, because the goal here is not simply maximizing dollars. It is protecting against one of the biggest risks in retirement, living longer than the original plan was truly prepared to carry. People say they want certainty. Fine. Delayed Social Security in the right household can be one of the strongest forms of certainty available. But again, notice the qualifier in the right household. That phrase matters more than the larger check. The third mechanism is what I call the constraint wall. This is the part the headlines insult. The source material says something very important here. Many Americans are not ignoring the advice because they are foolish. They are not ignoring it because they cannot understand arithmetic. They are ignoring it because they cannot afford to implement it. That makes this not mainly a behavioral problem. It makes it a constraint problem. Fay file site Fay turn 65 file 0 Fay. That distinction is everything. You cannot optimize a strategy. You cannot fund a household with limited savings, no meaningful pension, modest reserves, rising expenses, and little appetite or ability to keep working is not standing in front of a buffet of elegant options. That household is standing in front of a wall. This is where financial commentary becomes cheap. It loves to recommend the strongest move for a household that does not exist in enough numbers to justify the confidence. The source material points out that most Americans claim before 70, with many taking benefits in their early 60s, often because Social Security is not an optional optimization lever, but a core part of the plan itself. For many households, it replaces a huge share of income, sometimes 50%, 60%, or even 70% or more. Fay file site Fay turn 65 file 0 Fay. That means the wall is real. It means the household does not have the luxury of saying, we will just bridge 8 years somehow. Somehow is not a plan. If Social Security is the machine, then delay is not a neutral experiment. It is a stress event. And if that stress event forces too much sacrifice, too much portfolio strain, or too much anxiety, then the mathematically elegant move stops being elegant. It becomes brittle. I have no admiration for brittle plans. A plan that only works for a wealthy, healthy, flexible household with strong reserves is not wrong. It is just conditional. The trouble begins when commentators stop saying conditional. The fourth mechanism is what I call the break-even mirage. This is where many people think they finally understand the issue, and then they oversimplify it immediately. The source material explains the break-even concept correctly. Claim earlier and you receive more checks, but each one is smaller. Claim later and you receive fewer checks. But each one is larger. The point where the lifetime dollars catch up often lands somewhere in the late 70s or early 80s, depending on which ages you are comparing. Fay file site Fay turn 65 file 0 Fay. That is useful, but it is not enough. And because it is not enough, I call it the break-even mirage. From a distance, it looks like the whole answer. Live past the break. Even age, delaying wins, die before the break. Even age, claiming earlier wins, that is too crude. Retirement is not a casino bet on your death year. It is a household system with taxes, market, spouses, withdrawals, Medicare, emotional behavior, health, and sequence risk all moving at once. Break-even math matters. But by itself, it is like looking at one beam and pretending you understand the entire bridge. Health matters. Yes. Family history matters. Yes. But so do survivor rules, portfolio strain, tax structure, work flexibility, and the damage that early drawdowns can do if you are using your investments too aggressively while trying to wait. That is why the break-even chart is informative but incomplete. And incomplete plans are where expensive mistakes live. The fifth mechanism is what I call the portfolio bridge. Now we arrive at the part that makes the whole subject concrete. The source material gives a very good example. A retiree at 62 has a $350,000 portfolio and needs $40,000 a year. If that person delays Social Security until 70, the entire $40,000 has to come from the portfolio for 8 years. That is roughly an 11 to 12% withdrawal rate. That is not bold, that is dangerous. If instead the person claims about $18,000 a year from Social Security starting at 62, then the portfolio only needs to fund about $22,000, reducing the withdrawal rate to around 6%. Still elevated, yes, but much more survivable. Fay Filicite Fay Turn 65 File 0 Fay, that is the portfolio bridge. And once you see the numbers in that form, the romance of delaying starts losing some of its power. A portfolio is not a moral object. It is a carrying tool. If you ask too much of it too early, especially in the first fragile years of retirement, you can permanently weaken the machine in order to secure a larger check later. The larger later check may still be real. The question is what it cost you to get there. This is where sequence risk becomes brutal. If markets fall early and you are drawing 11% or 12% from the portfolio while waiting for a bigger Social Security payment at 7, you are not merely being patient, you are stripping wood from the bridge while still trying to walk across it. That is not strategy, that is denial. A bigger future benefit can reduce future strain. I agree with that, but only if the portfolio bridge is strong enough to reach that future without causing unacceptable damage. That is the whole issue. And it is why single retirees or households with modest portfolios so often make the right decision by claiming earlier. They are not being weak, they are respecting the machine they actually have. The sixth mechanism is what I call the couple S lever. Now the analysis gets more mature. The source material rightly emphasizes that married households have a different set of incentives. The higher earner S claiming decision affects not only current retirement income, but also the future survivor benefit. That means delaying for the higher earner can be much more powerful than delaying for the lower earner. Fay Filicite Fay Turn 65 File 0 Fay, that is the couple S lever. Most people still think about Social Security, one person at a time even when they are not living one, person retirements. That is a mistake. In a married household, the claiming question is not merely how much do I get, it is what happens to us while both of us are alive. And what happens to the survivor after one of us is gone. That is a different level of seriousness. The higher earner may be in a position where delaying is especially valuable, not because the household needs every extra dollar today, but because the delayed benefit strengthens the floor for the spouse, who may eventually be left alone. That is not only strategy, that is care. This is why blanket advice fails so badly. A single retiree with modest assets and weak bridge capacity may have excellent reasons to claim earlier. A married higher earner with strong reserves, good health, and a desire to protect the surviving spouse may have equally excellent reasons to delay. Both decisions can be rational. Only one thing is irrational. Pretending the same sentence governs both. That is why adults build household strategy, not slogan strategy. The seventh mechanism is what I call the work extension. This is one of the least glamorous and most powerful answers in the whole conversation. The source material points out that delaying works best when paired with either enough assets to fund the gap or with the ability to keep working longer. Work income can function as the cleanest possible bridge because it reduces or eliminates the need to drain the portfolio while waiting. Fay Filicite Fay Turn 65 File 0 Fay, that is the work extension. The public hears work longer and treats it like punishment. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is one of the highest return retirement moves available. A person who can keep earning for a bit longer, keep contributing, keep the portfolio intact, and then claim later with a stronger balance sheet and a larger guaranteed benefit is not being trapped by work. That person may be buying a much calmer retirement. Of course, this is not always available. Health can fail, labor markets can be ugly, caregiving duties can intervene. Some jobs are simply too punishing to extend. Fine, but the point matters. The bridge can be built with labor, not only with portfolio withdrawals. And when it is, the whole case for delaying changes. I have always believed that one of the worst habits in retirement thinking is pretending the only variables are accounts and ages. Human capital still matters in the late 50s and early 60s. A tolerable year or two of continued work can produce more security than a theoretically optimal plan that requires a retiree to live nervously through 8 years of portfolio strain. The eighth mechanism is what I call the certainty premium. This part does not show up neatly in spreadsheets, but it shows up everywhere in real households. The source material is right to mention behavior, peace of mind, and the human need for income. Now, those are not side issues. They are part of the actual structure. Fay turn 65 file 0 Fay, that is the certainty premium. People do not retire as equations. They retire as nervous systems. A person claiming earlier may be buying more than a smaller check. He may be buying sleep. He may be buying reduced anxiety. He may be lowering the chance of panic selling in a downturn. He may be lowering marital tension. He may be reducing the emotional burden of feeling that every market move now threatens the bridge that matters. A plan that looks perfect in theory, but makes the household miserable or fearful in practice, is not as strong as it appears. Likewise, a household with strong assets and high confidence may place a very high value on delaying because the larger later check fits their temperament and their structure perfectly. Good again, fit is the issue, not age by itself. The ninth mechanism is what I call the Medicare Gate. The source material is right to remind people that Social Security claiming does not exist in isolation from the rest of retirement planning, and Medicare is one of the biggest transition points sitting right in the middle of those years. Fay file site Fay turn 65 file 0 Fay, that is the Medicare Gate. Age 65 changes the terrain, healthcare coverage, healthcare cost, plan design, premium structure, and broader retirement cash flow all interact with the years when many people are deciding whether to claim, delay, work, bridge, or restructure spending. This matters because isolated advice is usually weak advice. You do not make the Social Security decision in a vacuum any more than you make a mortgage decision without looking at income. Everything touches everything else. That is the real challenge of retirement. Not complexity for its own sake. Interdependence if healthcare costs are changing, if work income is changing, if withdrawals are beginning, if taxes are shifting, then the claiming decision must live inside that larger frame, or it will give you the illusion of precision while the rest of the system remains blurry. The 10th and final mechanism is what I call the household fit. This is the real answer to the whole thing. The source material lands here properly. Most serious expert research is not saying everyone should wait until 70. It is saying delay if you can afford to delay, if the household can support the bridge, and if the larger later benefit solves the right problem for your plan. Fay file site Fay turn 65 file 0 Fay, that is the household fit. It sounds less exciting than a headline. Good. Headlines exist to get your attention. Household fit exists to protect your life. What are you actually solving for? Do you need current income? Do you need to protect a modest portfolio from excessive early withdrawals? Are you in excellent health with a strong family history of longevity? Are you the higher earner in a married couple? Do you have strong bridge assets? Can you keep working? Would waiting create strength or would it create strain? That is how adults ask the question, not what age do experts like. But what structure does this household actually live inside? That is the adult move. Now let me tell you what I would actually do if I were helping a real household work through this tonight. First, I would list every bridge resource, wages, spouse income, pension flows, taxable accounts, Roth money, cash reserves, part-time work possibilities, everything that can carry the years between retirement and a later claim. Second, I would calculate the strain of delaying, not just the reward, what must come from the portfolio, for how many years, what withdrawal rate does that imply, what happens if the market behaves badly right away. Third, I would model married households differently from single households. Survivor protection changes the math. Fourth, I would incorporate health and family longevity, honestly, not sentimentally. Fifth, I would respect behavior. If the plan depends on the retiree staying perfectly calm through years of uncertainty, it is weaker than it looks. Sixth, I would fit healthcare transitions and the Medicare Gate into the broader timing question. Seventh, I would stop asking for the best age and start asking for the best fit. That is enough, not catchy enough for a news segment. Plenty strong enough for a real life. Now let me end where I began. With the bridge, the reason fewer than 1 in 10 Americans wait until 70 is not simply that 9 in 10 are careless or financially illiterate. The source material gives the better explanation. Waiting until 70 is often a luxury strategy. It is something you do when enough of the rest of the machine is already working. Fay file site Fay turn 65 file 0 Fay, that is the truth. A larger future check can be wonderful. A higher guaranteed floor can be extremely valuable. A stronger survivor benefit can be a beautiful act of planning. But none of those things matter if the bridge collapses before you reach the other side. So forget the lazy moralizing, forget the headline, forget the tidy framing that makes ordinary households sound irrational because they are not following a mathematically elegant move built for stronger balance sheets than the ones they actually have. The real question is not whether waiting until 70 is smart in the abstract. The real question is whether your household can cross the bridge without tearing the rest of the retirement structure apart. That is the only question that matters. And once you answer it honestly, the right claiming age usually becomes much quieter and much clearer. That is what I would trust, not the headline, the bridge.